So our show's called Content is for Closers. It's a very niche show. Like if you're not into finding ways to leverage content for career or business or something, it's going to be super boring. And that's a good thing. So right off the bat, we know if someone is listening to our show, they're either already doing what we're talking about, and it's just, good for ideation or whatever, or they're probably a great prospect. And so, early on, we tried to monetize through ads. And quickly we found that the advertisers we could get were distracting from the message that we had, because we could get an I'm not going to say the names because I'm thankful, but we had a few advertisers that were CPG products or D2C or whatever. And that was good, but it didn't, if you're thinking about content and all of a sudden there's an ad for some unrelated CPG product, it kind of just messes with what you're thinking about. And you have to get back into, okay, let's talk about content and growth. And so for us, we just got rid of that entirely because it might take twice as long and there might only be, 10% of people who convert versus whatever number it would have been before. But that conversion is so valuable to us. We retain our customers. We have a very long lifetime value with our customers. So we'd much rather just do that as opposed to advertising. And then on the other side of bringing on guests and developing relationships with them, I mean, it's not just for prospect development. It's things like this. Like, Kyle, you came on the show. We had a great conversation about your history, what you're doing with Monetize, all the ideas that you have around the creator economy, which serve all the people that we're trying to serve when it comes to our audience. And now we're having this conversation and more people are going to hear about our company because of this. So it's really just a network effect tool that we use as a part of an account-based marketing strategy, but not in like a devious way. It's just like organically when you connect as humans, you're going to end up having a little bit of a ripple effect.
Yeah, more of an observation than anything, but it's funny, like, I don't know, a little over a decade ago, for me, it felt like the only way to play and to get what you were looking for out of the internet was ads, SEO,
sure,
that very basic toolbox. And the creator economy has essentially been able to bring about the relationship, word of mouth process that I think most people felt was going to be lost with the internet, and it has just come roaring back. And I think what you're describing has a lot to do with that, where I think also, too, people probably realize the insanity of some of the wasteful inefficiencies of Google ads, Facebook ads, if it's not done right.
Right.
And then essentially using yourself and your network in the end is probably the best suited way to grow a business anyway.
Yeah, and then just building a platform like what you all are doing and what we have been doing and are continuing to do, it just has endless ramifications. Like, the things that I've been able to do because of our show are kind of ridiculous. We've been featured a bunch of different places. I've been asked to speak. Like, I spoke at a founders camp for a venture capital firm. I've never raised money. Like, I like, what I mean? There's so many things that I'm definitely not qualified to do, but I have this one slither that I've developed talking points over, which is what we're talking about right now. And so that has value to someone because of that. That wouldn't happen outside of the podcast. So, I mean, it's all very intuitive stuff, but it's just like doing it and actually realizing it, I think, is the experience.
I do think there's a lot of people out there who it's probably not that intuitive to, right? I mean, if a lot of people look, and I think if whether they want to be an influencer, a YouTuber, a podcaster, I certainly did early on. You look at it through the lens of more traditional media that radio, television, as the primary ones, newspapers if it's a website or a blog, and you're thinking about, I can get an audience and then I could sell subscriptions or ads. And, they kind of look at it through solely that lens, which is a good lens. If you're good at it, it works. But I think we're seeing more and more, and certainly what your show and your business focus on are people who are using it a bit more strategically, like you are, to create opportunities. Talk about how do you have to walk your clients through that and say, like, hey, don't think about your podcast as a way to get advertising dollars. Think of it as a way to create business or opportunities, because I do think that's lost on a lot of people. And if you're in the right niche, you only need 100 of the right listeners to get one opportunity that could be worth millions of dollars if it's the right business partner or client or something like that.
Yeah, not to sound sanctimonious or virtue signal, because I really believe what I'm about to say. Even saying that, like, hey, don't look at it as a way to advertise, look at it as a way to monetize, essentially, at some point, I think is the wrong first step. I think it's like the near second step, but serving that 100, and that's where I'm saying, like, it sounds sanctimonious, but serving that 100 people is the actual gateway. It's the actual, like, key. If you can just find a way to add actual value to 100 people, like, most jobs don't do that. You know what I mean? Most people who are making well into the six figures are pushing emails around, and they're not serving 100 people. Like, that is a real accomplishment. And so if you're able to do that, from there, you know, it's just a matter of having the right things fall your way, making the right connections. Scaling becomes the issue. But that initial 100, you know, that's what I when I was talking about my first year, I was just trying to find what it is that I could do to serve, right? And I think if I would have framed it this way, I probably would have gotten to where we got to more quickly. But I was overly concerned with, like, how I'm going to make the next dollar. I don't have that coming. And so it's not easy. But I would start there. And then, we have to always remind our clients, like, don't be out there pitching your product. Nobody wants to it's not a show if you're pitching your product. It's a really bad QVC ad, and no one's going to subscribe to that. So teaching them and coaching them on how to tell a story, how to structure a narrative that is bigger than themselves, or the technology that they're selling, or what they offer as a VC, or whatever the case may be, what the sports blog is, like finding some way to make it about the customer and solving that problem. Everything else will kind of fall into place after that.
It's a really interesting way of putting it, because you always hear that phrase, 1,000 true fans, for someone who wants to have an audience. And it's true. If you find 1,000 people, you can find a way to monetize it. But you're shrinking that down, by 90%, taking it to 100 people and saying, like, hey, you don't even need to monetize it the traditional way. You serve these people and good things will happen, outsized to success that you might just be able to get from building an audience and doing the traditional thing. And I never really thought about it that way, but I guess, you see 100 downloads in a podcast or something, or on a website, and you're like, well, that's not that many people. There's people with tens of thousands, millions of viewers and listeners and readers. But then you think about it, like, how many times has anyone stood in front of a room? Most people aren't Gary Vee, right? They're not in front of a room of 100 people ever, or once in their life you can remember that time you gave a big speech. That's a really,
if you think about it, in light of that, it's essentially a really full movie theater, that's listening to you talk about whatever thing. That's never going to happen. You're not going to go stand in front of a movie theater of people and talk about, I'm not going to stand in front of a movie theater of people and talk about, like, hey, here's 3 tips to make your storytelling on your show better. Like, nobody wants to go watch that. But effectively, that's what people are doing, and they're opting into it. So the psychology behind that is really, really powerful when you think about, okay, well, if they're opting into that, okay, great. How do we find more people like that? But B, what else does that signal? What else are they willing to do? How else can I make connections or serve them or whatever? I think it's just a good starting place as you're thinking.